Hello, everybody. Welcome to the official Fightful Boxing Podcast, recapping Canelo Alvarez versus Daniel Jacobs, the unification fight for the IBF, WBA, and WBC middleweight world titles. We just finished watching this fight. Canelo Alvarez retains his WBA and WBC titles, adds the IBF middleweight world title to his collection of titles at 160 pounds. We're going to break all of that down, as well as the rest of this entire card that took place on at the T-Mobile Arena on the Zone, breaking down every single fight. So you want to hit. So before we get into all of what happened with Canelo Alvarez and Daniel Jacobs, the lead up to this fight, what happened inside the fight, the controversy, or I guess lack thereof controversy, up until the face-off yesterday to the second day weight check that Daniel Jacobs actually missed, or at least he missed weight at that second day weight check. Before we get all of that, why don't you hit that subscribe button? Subscribe to our new Fightful MMA and Boxing podcast. Kind of, get some people in here while we get get more people in. Want to join in the live chat? You have a comment? You have a question you have for me regarding this fight, regarding anything boxing? This has been a very big week overall of boxing, where we had multiple big fights take place on Thursday in Las Vegas to tonight. Lots to break down. So subscribe to our hit that subscribe button, leave us a thumbs up. Really do appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for all of you who tuned into the Fightful MMA podcast, or the Fightful Boxing podcast, all the shows that we do on the Fightful Pro Wrestling YouTube channel. All much appreciated. And now, kind of time to break down Canelo Alvarez versus Daniel Jacobs. As I just mentioned, Canelo Alvarez beats Jacobs to win the WBA, or at least unify the WBA, WBC, and IBF middleweight titles. And he did so by unanimous decision, a very close unanimous decision. Scores were 115, 113, 115, 113, and 116, 112. If you ask me, I had the fight in favor of Canelo, 115, 113. And I think those scores were pretty respectable for the most part. There was no lack of no controversy regarding the main event. There was nothing really that Jacobs had a lot to complain about. He didn't even complain much, if at all, during the post-fight interview. So let's break down the actual what happened. So the first few rounds between Canelo Alvarez and Daniel Jacobs were much of a kind of a chess match, if you ask me. It was not the explosive war between two great punchers that the buildup kind of made it seem like it was. Really, and I did kind of expect that. I thought, for the first few rounds, both guys were kind of establishing their rhythm, setting the pace, seeing what they can do with the jab. Jacobs was really trying to work the jab early in the fight. Didn't really get much going there, as he tried to throw punches. I believe he outthrew Canelo Alvarez for that entire fight, especially in the first half of the fight. But Canelo Alvarez, credit to him, he had a great defensive game plan tonight. He really, his game plan was mainly just, moved ahead. It's constantly being moving around the ring. He didn't really do much, that kind of wowed anyone. But what he did well, Canelo Alvarez, on the defensive side, is that he didn't let Daniel Jacobs kind of get into an easy rhythm where he would throw punches, and got to a point where he kind of frustrated Daniel Jacobs into sort of adjusting his game plan on the fly. It was kind of weird. Nothing. It was Daniel Jacobs went to southpaw a couple of times and didn't really perform that well on the southpaw stance. And what I don't understand why he kind of did that, as he really wasn't trying to, do much against Canelo Alvarez. And at this moment, I do think that Jacobs was trying to sort of, maybe if I change stances, maybe it'll make Canelo Alvarez a little uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm trying to do. It was very bizarre, but quite frankly, I'm not sure what the game plan was trying to go into southpaw. He didn't really do much in the middle rounds. quite into the seventh, eighth rounds, that's where we kind of saw Daniel Jacobs really, really do well because he was starting to have a much easier time kind of throwing punches at Canelo Alvarez. I don't know if Canelo Alvarez was gassing out or, he was sort of maybe taking the foot off the gas pedal just a little bit, but Jacobs felt more comfortable throwing upstairs, utilizing the jab, pressuring Canelo Alvarez. And I think that was the key thing. Daniel Jacobs pressured Canelo Alvarez to the ropes multiple times in the second half of the fight. And I kind of understood that, maybe if Daniel Jacobs had done that for earlier in the fight, he could have actually won this on the scorecards, which, it kind of seems, really, really incredible to think that Daniel Jacobs, had he done just a little bit more in those first 6 rounds, he could have walked away with the 3 middleweight world titles. But as he said in the post-fight interview, he was having a hard time kind of trying to figure out what Canelo Alvarez's pace was going to be for the fight. I don't remember if it was Daniel Jacobs or Chris Mannix who said that, but Canelo Alvarez is a pop shot fighter or whatever it is, the language that he used to describe Canelo Alvarez. Is the kind of guy that he's not the type of guy that will throw 1,000 punches in the fight. What he does is he's so accurate. He pinpoints his punches to the point where when he lands, it makes it seem like they really do something, and those are punches where the judges do notice, and that's one of the things that I think favor. A lot of people were kind of thinking about when predicting Canelo Alvarez winning. It's not so much that the judges would have a certain favoritism towards Canelo Alvarez, but because Canelo's style offensively is, judge friendly, not in the sense where it's kind of like Floyd Mayweather, where he's a defensive genius. He frustrates his opponents, and he doesn't to the point where his opponents don't do anything well against Floyd Mayweather, and Floyd just wins via with technical prowess. Canelo does this with more power, and every time he throws a shot, it stands out more. And the way I'm looking at this fight, and I think Canelo Alvarez, did really well in the first half of the fight. I think his footwork, I thought his defensive game plan was outstanding. He did not let Daniel Jacobs land really anything. And it just got to the point where there was nothing Jacobs could do in the first few rounds that really could, swing the fight a lot in his favor. But I just thought that this fight really was okay, nothing too great. I said this right before the fight that I thought this fight was going to be good. I thought that this fight was going to be just a little bit below Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin, and I do mean both fights in terms of quality, and we kind of got that. We got some moments in the fight where there was a lot of good exchanges. I believe it maybe the 8th round, where it was, where the last minute, or actually you can say this throughout the entire round, where both guys just really let their hands go. They were really throwing punches out there. But one thing about it, we didn't really see a whole lot of it throughout the whole fight. It was the crowd was booing at various points in the fight, especially in the 11th round early on when Canelo Alvarez and Daniel Jacobs were kind of just trying to ease things, sort of a normal pace, nothing too frantic. And I think that's kind of where I think Daniel Jacobs started losing the fight, where at moments he was maybe not hesitant, but he just didn't think that he could, he should throw more than he did. Again, he did he outworked Canelo Alvarez at certain points in the fight, but it doesn't really translate to landing good enough shots where the judges are going to, take notice and score the rounds in your favor. A lot of Jacobs' rounds where he did really well against Canelo Alvarez, they were more towards working the body. And when you're talking about a 12-round fight, a 12-round championship fight against a guy like Canelo Alvarez, working the body doesn't really do much in your favor. It doesn't really do much overall when it comes to judging a fight. Not saying that body punches don't matter, but when you're a judge and you're kind of looking up and your field of vision may not be, at its most optimal point, body shots don't really stand out much to you. And Canelo Alvarez, he threw a lot of big shots upstairs instead of to the body. He did throw a lot of good shots to the body, but a lot of the shots that you notice were more towards, towards the face, upstairs, towards the chin. And overall, I thought that Canelo Alvarez did a lot, had a great plan. He executed thoroughly for the most part. I thought he didn't do that well throughout the last 4 or 5 rounds of the fight. Maybe although he did kind of take the 12 on my scorecard, and I think that may have been what won it for the on the judges' scorecards, who scored a 115, 113. I still don't know how much. I still have not seen any scorecards of the fight. I don't know if that's already been available, readily available. I'm going to try to see if maybe there is, but I would assume that the two judges scored a 115, 113 had scored the fight in favor of Canelo. So really, it's again, it had that last round. Had Jacobs done that, work that last round, maybe even get a knockdown, who knows? Maybe we could have seen a new unified middleweight champion, but it's not. It's Canelo Alvarez. I personally thought Canelo Alvarez was going to win this fight in the by unanimous decision, and it turns out I was pretty much right on the button. Although a lot of people kind of had Canelo Alvarez winning through that same method. After the fight, Canelo Alvarez kind of asked about what's next for him. There really is a lot of names that are not just at 160, but at 168. He does hold the WBA regular super middleweight title. He still has options up there. There are a lot of good names at that weight class, from John Ryder to Callum Smith, where the zone, where they are with the zone, and they can make that fight a lot easier. As far as what he thought, Canelo Alvarez kind of gave a real non-answer. They kept saying, I'm okay with whoever. I just want the biggest fights. Whoever comes in my way, I want to be the undisputed middleweight champion. Yada yada yada. Nothing that really we haven't heard already before. And Chris Mannix, and this is where you can really tell the zone desperately wants Canelo Triple G3 in September, because Chris Mannix asked a follow-up question about Gennady Golovkin, and Canelo was like, all right, if people want Canelo Triple G3, I'll give it to them, I'll beat them, which is kind of like, it was more of a, all right, if you guys wanted that badly, we'll do it, but it's not something that's on my radar at this moment. There's a lot of good names between 160 and 168, as I just mentioned. Not just from the 168 guys, Callum Smith and John Ryder. There's also, again, there's Golovkin, Demetrius Andrade, who's defending his WBO middleweight title in June against Maciej Sulecki. And, and Andrade, he's the last piece of that middleweight unification puzzle for Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez is just one title away from becoming the undisputed champion, and that means he has to fight Demetrius Andrade, or the winner of Andrade versus Sulecki this summer for Canelo Alvarez to become the undisputed middleweight champion. I don't know if Canelo Alvarez is going to really get that fight in September, which is what I guess that's the plan right now, is for Canelo Alvarez to defend his title in September. The question is which title, because if he's not against Golovkin in September or against Andrade, then there's really not much of a point for Canelo Alvarez to be at 160 when he can just simply maybe make the attempt to maybe face John Ryder, who won the interim title on the undercard, or even a Callum Smith, which I think that would be an excellent fight. But that's nothing that was too extravagant, and there was no drama. There was nothing that a lot of people, could take away from that post-fight interview. But overall, I thought that, this was a good fight between Canelo Alvarez and Daniel Jacobs. But let's be honest, it's nothing that, that really is going to be remembered for years and years to come. However, what is, something that we'll remember for a good while is some of the fights on this undercard. Breaking down, let's go down. Let's move, from forward to back from from the co-main event, and we'll work our way back to the start of the card. So the co-main event, Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Mauricio Herrera. This is a welterweight bout, but Vergil Ortiz, a highly touted undefeated prospect, was one of Golden Boy Promotions' Golden Goose's Golden Geese for the future. He's more of a junior welterweight, but he took a welterweight fight against Mauricio Herrera for tonight. Ortiz, my goodness, he landed a vicious hook upstairs that it knocked Mauricio Herrera standing. Like, he was knocked out. I said this on Twitter. Vergil Ortiz Jr. knocked the soul out of Mauricio Herrera, and I thought this was an excellent way to introduce Vergil Ortiz into the 140-pound title picture. Even though this was a 147, Ortiz is more of a natural 140 guy at this point in his career. He wants to go back to 140 to have a couple of fights and maybe challenge for a world title. He feels ready for it. He looked really, really good in this fight against a guy like Mauricio Herrera, who a lot of people thought he should have beaten Danny in a world title fight. And a lot of people thought Herrera was screwed out of that fight. And ever since then, it kind of feels like Mauricio Herrera, his career has kind of like spun. I don't know if it's spun out of control would be the right appropriate term, but Herrera does not seem, he was crushed after that Danny Garcia fight. And he has looked nothing. He hasn't looked like the same fighter since then. And Vergil Ortiz Jr. may have sent Mauricio Herrera into retirement. And really, for Herrera, he is a really good gatekeeper. But at this point in time, it's kind of, not much to say about what's left for Mauricio Herrera's career. He did real well for himself. Interim title holder, almost beat Danny Jacobs. Some say he should have beaten Danny Jacobs. But right now, it's Vergil Ortiz time, and he only wants 40 pounds. And the way he performed tonight, I kind of thought that maybe it's now time to sort of take the brakes off, take off the training wheels, so to speak, and make Vergil Ortiz into a real star, a real title contender at 140 pounds. And overall, I'm looking at the rankings at 140 pounds. And there's a lot to look at. There's a lot to break down. And for Vergil Ortiz, he's ranked number 9 by the WBO, and the world champion by the WBO. And at that weight class is Mauricio, who fights on the zone. He still doesn't have an opponent for a planned summer title defense, so that could potentially be in the plans for Vergil Ortiz and Maurice Hooker. We don't know. There's still a lot to kind of see what's next for Vergil Ortiz Jr. I don't know if Golden Boy Promotions wants to really throw Vergil Ortiz out into the wolves. Yes, maybe they'll spend the rest of the year really building him up into being a true title contender. He's 13 fights into his career, which is incredible, but there's a lot of guys with similar records or a similar age as he is that are really doing that well for himself, where they feel ready to potentially fight for a world title. Andrew Huntley said on our live chat, thanks to Andrew Huntley, saying Herrera got dominated by Frankie Gomez and has been on the downside for a while. Still, Vergil did well to freeze him solid within 3 rounds. I agree. I mean, Herrera, again, has done well for himself, but really, he has not looked the same fighter that he was a few years back. Obviously, he's past his prime, but even then, this fall from grace has kind of looked a little off for a guy like Mauricio Herrera, who is a really good fighter. But I think at this point, it's kind of, this might be it for Mauricio Herrera in terms of being a solid name out there. But it's been a good career, and listen, it produced a hell of a performance from Vergil Ortiz Jr., an excellent knockout. So, hey, we'll see what's next for Vergil Ortiz Jr. But, hey, he's not the only guy with Jr. in his name who won a big fight on the undercard. Actually, he's one of 3 guys, and the second one was Joseph Diaz Jr., who dominated Freddie Fonseca, stops him in the 7th round to win the WBA Gold Super Featherweight title, whatever the hell the gold title means, because I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's some sort of elevated interim title or, not as good interim title. And no one knows what the hell the WBA gold title is, but that's a separate conversation for another day. Joseph Diaz Jr. is fighting at 130. He previously challenged for a title at 126 against Gary Rosa Jr. He challenged for a secondary title at 126 against Jesus Rojas. And, it became abundantly clear at that point that Diaz was not doing that well as a 126-pound guy, and his true potential lies at 130 pounds, where you have guys that are kind of thinking about making the jump from 130 and above, where maybe a guy like Joseph Diaz Jr. could potentially come in and take advantage of some of those champions at 130. He's already called out IBF title holder Tevin Farmer out for a fight, and the two had a real heated exchange a couple of days ago after the Undercard press conference. And I gotta be honest, the way Joseph Diaz performed, and he dominated this fight. I thought he was gonna, end this fight a little sooner. He dropped Freddy Fonseca in the 6th round, and I thought that the fight could have been stopped right there. Freddy Fonseca looked like he was out of there. There was nothing he was going to do that was going to hurt Jojo Diaz. But regardless, the 7th round came. Jojo dominated. He just landed punches with ease, and it came to the point where it wasn't the referee to stop the fight. It was Freddy Fonseca's corner who threw in the towel. But the problem is they threw it to the back of referee Kenny Bayless. I think it was Kenny Bayless. He was doing it back, so he didn't see it. So Jojo kind of looked at the towel being thrown, hesitated for a quick second, then continued punching away until someone from the commission had to, jump into the ropes and, point to Kenny Bayless that the towel has been thrown just to ensure that Freddy Fonseca doesn't get real hurt out there. Luckily, he didn't get hurt, or at least didn't get hurt too badly. And Jojo Diaz looked good. He called out Tevin Farmer. That's a fight I really want to see. And let's be honest, that's a more realistic fight for Tevin Farmer at this point in time. Throughout I think 1 or 2 points in the broadcast, they kept talking about. Tevin Farmer, he could face Gervonta Davis at this point. Let's stop. It's not going to happen. At least anytime soon. It's not going to happen. It's becoming abundantly clear that Tevin Farmer is not interested in Gervonta Davis after calling him out multiple times, after the two had a real heated rivalry, and the months building up to Tevin Farmer winning, his first title challenge for the IBF belt, and was unsuccessful after the scorecards were really wacky, and then Kenichi Ogawa also failed the drug test. But in the months leading up to that, there was a lot of real animosity, and that's where the real calls for that fight to happen. What happens? The fight between Davis and Farmer was never made. Then Farmer moved on to the zone. Gervonta Davis went to remain with PBC and Mayweather Promotions. And Eddie Hearn, try as he might, he tried to get Gervonta Davis. He kept saying to the public, "I'm going to offer you a real big contract for you just to fight Tevin Farmer." Gervonta Davis said, "No, thanks. I'm good. I'm good here in PBC. Well, I'm good with Showtime, Fox, Floyd Mayweather Promotions." And Tevin Farmer was a little insulted upon all of this because he kept hearing that his promoter, Eddie Hearn, kept saying, we're going to offer Gervonta Davis a lot of money. And then Tevin Farmer kept saying, "No, hey, what about me? I want that money." And so it became at that point that he didn't want that fight anymore. And I think this narrative should be done with. Tevin Farmer versus Jojo Diaz is about as good as it can get at this moment at 130 pounds. And I think it's good. It's a good fight. Joseph Diaz has really looked good in his 2 fights at 130 pounds since those unsuccessful title challenges at 126 pounds. And I think that's a reasonable fight to make. I don't know if it's a 50-50 fight, but I think Joseph Diaz Jr. stands a real good chance at winning the IBF title right then and there. So opening fight of the main card, Lamont Roach Jr. versus Jonathan Oquendo for the unified WBO International and NABO Super Featherweight titles. This is another fight where you have a Golden Boy Promotions guy undefeated, kind of making the jump up to real title contendership, and Vergil and Lamont Roach Jr. look good in here. He really, had a real good outing in the last few rounds against Jonathan Oquendo, I thought, the scorecards read 97-92, 97-92, 96-93. I thought that was way too wide for Lamont Roach Jr. I actually had Jonathan Oquendo winning 95-94, but let's be honest. But listen, this was a case of I'm my own theory. I'm not saying that there's something fishy, but Lamont Roach Jr. is the A side on this fight. He looked better in the last few rounds of the contest. This is a Golden Boy Promotions card headlined by Canelo Alvarez, and we are in Las Vegas. I'm just saying these things happen, and I thought Jonathan Oquendo did real well. Oquendo's game plan was to work the body and kind of hurt Lamont Roach from with inside work, and it kind of a bit of a callback to what he said at the start of the of this podcast. When judges are scoring a fight and they're looking up, they don't have the best field of vision. They're not looking at the fight at the optimal angle that we people watch on TV, or at least from inside the arena at eye level. You miss some of those body punches. And I think this was a case where the judges weren't able to fully appreciate what Jonathan Oquendo was able to do. Because you look at Oquendo, and a lot of the fights, it was, especially the first 6 rounds, it was, Oquendo goes in the inside, throws a couple of body shots, and Lamont Roach would just kind of clinch. So when you're a judge and you're looking at that fight, and the thing that's in front of you is Lamont Roach's back, you can't see what Jonathan Oquendo is doing. You just can't. So you can't really say, oh, well, Jonathan Oquendo clearly won this fight, when you haven't really seen what Jonathan Oquendo truly did. And I thought, I don't know if you could call this a robbery, because Lamont Roach really did well in the last few rounds of the fight. He hurt Jonathan Oquendo a couple of times. He started to working upstairs. When he was given space to work with, he really let his hands go, really working the jab, splitting Jonathan Oquendo's defense. But there was nothing really spectacular about this fight, except that the crowd didn't like the decision, because they saw it as I did, that Oquendo did a lot better than what the judges gave him credit for. But unfortunately, it's Lamont Roach moving forward. It's a real damn shame, because Jonathan Oquendo is 35 years old. There's not a lot of left in him in terms of career, and this may have ended his chances at fighting for a super featherweight world title. The winner of this fight could have potentially been the next man in line for the winner of the Masayuki Ito versus Jamel Herring fight for the WBO super featherweight title, taking place, I believe, next month or in July. I can't remember off the top of my head. My whole head has been focused on the Las Vegas fight that I can't seem to remember right now about the zone, about anything that isn't a DAZN fight at this moment. But overall, I thought maybe there was nothing that I thought that, listen, Jonathan Oquendo did real well in the first half of the fight, but he didn't do enough, in my opinion. It was, again, he threw a couple of punches on the inside, and the Lamont Roach clinched. I'm not saying that Jonathan Oquendo didn't do enough to win, because I thought he did, but couple that with the way judges score a fight, and the way Oquendo's game plan worked, it didn't look good for Jonathan Oquendo to win. What didn't help was the fact that late in the fight, Oquendo kind of threw his head in, and he was deducted a point. Very, very iffy. I didn't think he should have been deducted a point. Even the broadcasters, who at this point seemed very pro Golden Boy, they thought, even Sergio Moro was saying, listen, I don't think that should have been enough to deduct a point. So overall, I thought that this fight could have gone either way, although I did think that Jonathan Oquendo won the fight. But it was close. I don't know if you're Oscar De La Hoya, you look at that fight and you think to yourself, I don't think you're going to fight Masayuki. Time will tell, but I do think that Vergil Ortiz is not ready for at least not at this moment. Moving on to the undercard, the prelim card, very interesting. So we have maybe one of the biggest upsets that we'll see in the last few months. Anthony Young beats Saddam Ali with a late third round stoppage, becomes the new USNBC silver welterweight title. And for those of you wondering, yes, that's a real title. It is a regional silver title. It's very bizarre, but you look at the lineage of the title, it's very, very bizarre because you have Jaron Ennis and Ramon Alvarez, Canelo Alvarez's brother, as previous title holder. It's a very weird lineage and a very weird title. What wasn't weird was the fight itself. Anthony Young hurt Saddam Ali from the start of the fight. Saddam Ali looked shot from the get-go. I don't know what was wrong with him, but he didn't look good at all. I don't know if it was just him trying to rush into a fight or didn't take Anthony Young seriously. But Anthony Young was real hungry out there in the ring, performed extremely well, scored a major upset against a former world title holder. And let's not forget, Saddam Ali, as the smaller fighter, beat Miguel Cotto in his retirement fight to become the WBO junior middleweight champion. But looking at the Saddam Ali career trajectory arc, it's very weird. He goes, he becomes, a welterweight fringe contender, goes up to 154, beats Miguel Cotto, was supposed to fight Liam Smith. And looking back, with hindsight being 2020, I think Liam Smith would have beat Saddam Ali. Again, that's hindsight being 2020. Liam Smith goes down with an injury. In comes Jaime Munguia. He just batters away at Saddam Ali, drops him 4 times. It almost could have killed him if the fight was allowed to keep going. And at this moment, and Saddam Ali loses the title, and Saddam Ali, let's face it, he's shot, he's down, he hasn't recovered from that fight, from that loss to Jaime Munguia. And, it's kind of sad to see a former world champion have a fall from grace as hard and as quick as he did. But that's the truth. Saddam Ali, I don't know, I don't want to say like his chances at another world title opportunity are done, but in a loaded welterweight division where none of the title holders are on the zone, 3 of them are, well, technically 4 if you count Manny Pacquiao's WBA regular title. 4 of them are with PBC. The 5th one, Terrence Crawford, is with Top Rank. At this point, and the problem is, Saddam Ali can't go to 154, even though there is a title holder that the zone has at 154. Because Saddam Ali is a small junior middleweight. He was a small junior middleweight when he fought Cotto and lucked out and had the performance of his life against Miguel Cotto, who tore his bicep late in the fight. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is it. This is it for Saddam Ali. And I don't know what's next for him. I don't know if Saddam Ali even knows what's next for him. I don't think he's gonna retire, but his career is gonna be in limbo for the next couple of years, in my opinion, as he kind of tries to work his way back on. At this point, calling him a fringe contender is not even enough to describe Saddam Ali at this point. Manny Rodriguez on our live chat, thanks for chatting in. He says, can't wait to watch Naoya Inoue fight in the World Boxing Super Series. Yes, I am excited for that fight. Naoya Inoue versus Emmanuel Rodriguez. Really excited for that fight. Taking place in a couple of weeks in Scotland. Really excited for that one. But yeah, going back to Saddam Ali, man, I don't know. I just thought that this fight showed that this is it for Saddam Ali and his career as a world title contender, regardless of what weight class he is. He's not going to 140 pounds. He's not going to 154. And if he's staying at 147, there's nothing for him out there. He not only has to work his way back up to fringe contendership, he then has to work his way back up to contendership and convince one of the PBC guys or Terrence Crawford at Top Rank to give him a shot at a title. And I just don't see that happening. So, he'll keep fighting. at this point, it's now starting to be Saddam Ali's entering gatekeeper status, which again is amazing considering that it was less than 18 months ago when he defeated Miguel Cotto to win a world title. So we'll see what's next. But I spent a lot of time talking about Saddam Ali. I want to give credit to Anthony Young because goddamn, boy, that Anthony Young looked real good out there. He was aggressive. He pounced on Saddam Ali from the start of the fight, and don't think that Anthony Young isn't going away anytime soon because he's on a healthy win streak. I'm counting right now how many wins he has right now. 9, I believe, 9 wins in a row, 9 or 10. He's 31 years old. He's kind of entering, right now, BoxRec has him up as number 396 at welterweight. I think that's a little bit unfair. I'm not saying that he's going to be now immediately a dark horse to watch out for in terms of title contendership, but I think he's a guy that I think has earned the right to have a few more of these types of fights against names up in the level of Saddam Ali. He's definitely earned the opportunity to get those type of fights. And you know what? Congratulations to Anthony Young. A tremendous performance out there. He's a guy who really has worked hard since being stopped twice between 2014 and 2016. So we'll see. So it'll be interesting to see how Saddam Ali goes from here, and Anthony Young as well. I think Anthony Young could potentially be a guy that we'll see fairly soon on one of these boxing Golden Boy or the Zone boxing cards in the near future. So we got about 3 fights left. John Ryder versus Bilal Akawi for the interim WBA super middleweight title. Originally, this fight was supposed to be John Ryder versus David Lemieux, but Lemieux suffered a right hand injury weeks before the fight. In comes Bilal Akawi, another Golden Boy Promotions guy who actually is a teammate of Canelo Alvarez. He's been with Eddie Reynoso for some time now. He's been real good as an up and coming prospect at under 68 pounds. May have been rated a little bit too highly by the WBA by this point in his career, and it kind of shows in this fight. But he looked good. He was a solid prospect, but coming in as a late replacement against John Ryder. The odds were stacked well against him, and John Ryder made Bilal Akawi pay, dominated the fight almost from the second round onwards. He hurt Bilal Akawi, stops him in the third round to win the interim super middleweight title. I know a lot of people will not consider this is not a real title. It's an interim title, and John Ryder won it against the backup option because Lemieux was the original opponent. But don't be surprised that John Ryder could maybe have potentially won himself a shot against Canelo Alvarez. Because as I mentioned earlier, Canelo Alvarez does hold the WBA regular super middleweight title, the secondary world title, and it's still a mystery why the WBA continues to have these regular, secondary, interim, gold, whatever titles they like to throw up next. A few boxing folk and I were on Twitter we're talking about what next title the WBA was going to throw into our faces next, and I said, God, I forgot what it was, but it was something. But I said something like the interim uranium Denny's Grand Slam regular copper WBA title, because at this point, who the hell knows what title the WBA is going to come up with next? But John Ryder is the interim title, and the next title holder up by the WBA at 168 pounds is Canelo Alvarez. I'm not saying that's the next fight next. It could happen down the line, maybe. But the way you look at it is, John Ryder is a matchroom boxing guy. He's the guy promoted by Eddie Hearn, and therefore he's a DAZN fighter. Canelo Alvarez holds a secondary title at 168. And if he doesn't get Demetrius Andrade or Golovkin next at 160 pounds, there's nothing for him to do at 168. So why not have, maybe go down to Mexico, maybe go ahead and sell out Estadio Azteca. That'd be a real interesting sight to see. Canelo Alvarez go down to Estadio Azteca, which could potentially well over 100,000 people. As we've seen when Julio Cesar Chavez did, I forgot what it was, like 140,000 people a couple of decades ago, a long time ago. And why not have Canelo Alvarez kind of say, "Oh, hey, I'm an active champion at 168. I'm willing to defend both titles, titles at both weight classes when need be." And and hey, John Ryder is a guy where he looked well enough in this fight to kind of warrant a look by Canelo Alvarez. I think John Ryder's like Plan D in terms of September Mexican Independence Day weekend opponent for Canelo. But the way he performed tonight, it was enough to make him a potential backup option. Like, obviously, John Ryder probably wasn't even on anyone's radar. But the fact that now he is as a potential, all right, Canelo Alvarez is, he doesn't got nothing better else to do if he doesn't get Andrade or Golovkin next. That's the reason why John Ryder could potentially get a big fight next. As far as his chances of beating Canelo Alvarez, let's face it. I mean, it's maybe about as well as Rocky Fielding. We all saw how that turned out, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but hey, kudos to John Ryder. Excellent performance tonight against Bilal Akaway. Early prelims. There's two more fights left. Arama Vanyan defeats Francisco Esparza by unanimous decision to retain the WBC International Silver Featherweight title. And I'm saying this title distinction just for people who may be a little confused, because the WBC on their official website and on BoxRed they say international silver title, but they only said, I believe Joe Martinez, the ring announcer, said the WBC silver featherweight title. It's a very weird. These kinds of silvers, regional titles, they're all very weird, as evidenced by the USNBC silver title win by Anthony Young early in the broadcast. But yeah, so Avanyan gets dropped by Francisco Esparza in the second round of the fight. It became real interesting because Avanyan was looking good in the first round. Then he suddenly gets dropped in the second round, and Esparza kind of took those the next couple of rounds and really started to take advantage and really capitalize on that knockdown. Didn't do enough because Avanyan, had a furious rally in the entire second half of the fight and wins somewhat comfortably on the scorecards, 97-90 to 96-93 and 96-93, and retains his title. Avanyan's a guy who maybe not a lot of people are calling right now as a potential title challenger. I don't think he is right. I don't think he is the title challenger yet. He's not even ranked by the WBC. He holds the WBC regional title and is still not ranked by the top 15. So that kind of tells you where he stacks up in the featherweight division. He still has a long ways to go. He's maybe about a year and a half away at minimum from being a guy that we can really start talking about maybe potentially being in the conversation. But here's the problem. 18 months from now, things can change drastically for better or for worse for Avanyan. So I don't know what's, for Avanyan, he's going to keep getting these types of Francisco Esparza type of fights as, he progresses throughout his career. He's still young. He hasn't really done, he's not someone that, is this major prospect. I believe he was a Olympic boxer, but it's nothing like. But Avanyan's as a pro still hasn't done enough to sort of convince anybody that this is someone to watch out for. He did have he was coming off of a draw against Evgeny, I believe Evgeny Smirnov, in his last fight. So he's faced a couple of decent names throughout his career so far. He did fight Emmanuel Lopez, who I don't think a lot of people do recognize, but he's a guy who has, he has been sort of at the kind of regional title level. He's fought the likes of Carlos Padilla, Jose Cepeda, and obviously getting a big win, a fairly dominant win against Emmanuel Lopez last year. I think that bodes well for Avanya's prospects and ability to perform well in big fights. I'm just still worried that there's still a lot left for him to do. So throwing him out into the wolves at this point in his career, I think he's still maybe 2 years away from being someone that that you can reasonably say could be a potential title challenger. And lastly, last but not least, the shortest scheduled fight of the night, the opening bout of the T-Mobile Arena card, Alexis Espino versus Billy Wagner. Beats him by unanimous. Alexis Espino wins by unanimous decision. Drops Billy Wagner, I believe, in the third round, if I'm not mistaken. Wagner goes down, and then Espino throws a punch, I believe, after the bell. He threw a punch after the bell, and he was docked a point. So the scorecards reads as follows, which feels kind of a little weird: 39-35, 39-35, and 39-34. So the interesting thing is that Alexis Espino maybe got 2 10-8 rounds, or I guess in this case, not 2 10-8 rounds, but Billy Wagner got 2 rounds where he was given only 8 points. So that kind of goes to show just how much Wagner was dominated by Alexis Espino throughout the fight. He didn't win a single round this fight. I had it 39-35 on my scorecard. Espino, very, very young kid. He's only 19 years old. And, he's a guy, he is a long-term project. He's someone that is going to get these types of fights for the next few years as he continues to develop. But the fact that he was put on a position where a lot of people online got to see him on the DAZN YouTube stream of the undercard, or on the Golden Boy Promotions Facebook stream of the card, and there were plenty of people that were watching that fight. I believe there may have been as much as like there were a few thousand people watching that fight. So Alexis Espino kind of getting that coverage, that's going to bode well for him for his career moving forward. And he's a guy that's going to get a push by Golden Boy Promotions for the next few years. But again, that is something that, Espino is a prospect, a good-looking prospect, but he is a prospect nonetheless that is going to take several years down the line for Alexis Espino to really develop into this top contender that Golden Boy Promotions hopes to get someday. Again, he's only 19 years old. He's not even old enough to drink, so he's gonna spend the next few years getting these types of fights and getting more exposure. And I like what I see from Alexis Espino. I really do. So that's about covers the entire card. Quick recap again of the main event: Canelo Alvarez versus Daniel Jacobs. Alvarez wins by unanimous decision, unifies the WBA, WBC, and IBF middleweight titles by unanimous decision, as I mentioned. 115, 113 on 2 of the 3 scorecards, 116, 112 on the 3rd scorecard. Jacobs did real well, tremendous defensive game plan from the outset. Daniel Jacobs did real well in the last few rounds. He really made a case for himself that he could potentially made it a draw, but at this point it was a little bit too late. Even Jacobs after the fight, you can tell from the way he was reacting in some of his questions. Listen, hey, I gave it all I got, especially I couldn't do much in the first few rounds against Canelo Alvarez because I was trying to figure out what he was trying to do, and that's really one thing that you have to consider when you're fighting Canelo Alvarez is you really don't know what you're going to get from Canelo Alvarez. What type of fighter? You're going to get the a technical marvel from Canelo Alvarez. You're going to get strong body work from Canelo Alvarez. So I don't blame Daniel Jacobs for, not being as frustrated as one might have been when losing a close fight like that. Again, bravo to Daniel Jacobs. He did well, but I don't think he did quite enough to win. But you know what? But again, I think Daniel Jacobs has done tremendously well throughout this fight and throughout this career. He, very few people can say they have fought either Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. Even fewer can say they had a very close fight, not against one of them, against both of them. In fact, Jacobs is the only one at least in the pro ranks throughout history to say they fought both guys and both fights were real close. So I don't know what is next for Daniel Jacobs. That's the interesting part. Because Daniel Jacobs is a big middleweight. And after the fight, I thought that was really interesting from Eddie Hearn to talk about what's next for Jacobs, and he mentioned a potential move up to super middleweight. And as much as we were talking about, Alvarez maybe moving up in weight if he again if he doesn't get Golovkin or Demetrius Andre next, maybe Daniel Jacobs could potentially be the guy to face John Ryder next. Both guys are matchroom guys. Both guys are promoted by Eddie Hearn. It's not unreasonable to think that Jacobs down the line could be a super middleweight contender and even win a world title. I think he is good enough to fight for a super middleweight world title and win one. He is he's a big, strong middleweight, and I do think up to a certain point, having to cut to 160 maybe can affect him at a certain point. He can rehydrate as much as he wants, but it's not going to negate the fact that he's had to cut to 160 for a big guy like him. It's going to be a little tough sometimes, and sometimes you enter a fight not at 100% because of the weight cut. So maybe going to 160 will allow him to fill out a little bit more, be stronger, going up against the big names in that particular weight class. So as much as I say Canelo Alvarez and John Ryder could be next or take place some place down the line, Daniel Jacobs could also be in that conversation. Maybe face a John Ryder, maybe face a Callum Smith, who's also another matchroom guy who's defending his title on June 1st, although that fight has yet to be officially announced, if I'm not mistaken. Although, from the looks of it, it looks like it's going to be Callum Smith versus Hassan and Dom, but that fight has not been formally announced by Matchroom Boxing. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, leaving a thumbs up on the video, subscribing to our Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel, commenting on the live chat. Really do appreciate it. Before I sign off, if anybody else has a comment or a question you want me to answer, as we're in the closing stages of this podcast, more than welcome to. You can find me on Twitter at Carlos Toro 360. That's Carlos Toro 360. .com. I'll love to hear what your opinions are of the fight, of the broadcast overall. Did you guys have any trouble watching the broadcast? I actually had a lot of moments where the broadcast just kind of buffered a little bit, and so I was maybe about a minute behind from most people on the DAZN stream. So I kind of got it's funny. Right before, like a few seconds before Michael Buffer made the official announcement, my phone rang up and it spoiled the results, saying that Canelo Alvarez won the fight, even though I had a feeling Canelo Alvarez was gonna win. I knew for a fact that I had a feeling Canelo Alvarez was gonna win, but it's still interesting that I got spoiled the fight and that I got the alert that the Canelo won before the actual announcement appeared on my DAZN stream. So it kind of gives you an idea of how behind I was with the broadcast. The DAZN really needs to work on their bandwidth or whatever it is they need when it comes to the live stream, because they have not looked good in people's eyes when it comes to the quality of the streams and the stability of those streams. So hopefully this fight, hopefully this broadcast was a learning experience for the DAZN engineers, and maybe the quality will improve by the time we get to June 1st for the Anthony Joshua fight against Anthony Ruiz, or even before that with the World Boxing Super Series card in Scotland in a couple of weeks. Andrew Huntley on our live chat asks, who's your pick for Jarrett Hurd versus Julian Williams? Boy, that's an interesting fight. Part of me had some doubts about Jarrett Hurd with the torn rotator cuff that he suffered, in the aftermath of his fight against Erislandy Lara last year. But he answered any doubts that I had with the fight against Jason Quigley. I still think he didn't look 100%, but I guess that was more of the rust and not being able to fully train. But now that he has a full training camp, he's going back home. I'm going to say Jarrett Hurd wins by unanimous decision. I give credit to Julian Williams. He's done real well to get back to the position that he has some people thought he was never going to come back to real title contendership status after he got knocked out by Jermell Charlo a couple of years back. So, it's good. I'm happy for Julian Williams for getting this opportunity. I think J. Rock didn't give Hurd a little bit of trouble, but I think ultimately Jared Hurd's going to come out on top. I think he's going to win. If you want my prediction, I say by decision, 116-112. I think that's, I guess for now, my on-the-record prediction of Jared Hurd versus Julian Williams. So if no one else has anything left for me to talk about, that about wraps it up for this edition of the Fightful Boxing Podcast, the Canelo Alvarez versus Daniel Jacobs post-show. Hope you guys had a lot of fun watching this podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed the fights, regardless if you had Canelo winning or not. Hope you guys enjoyed the rest of the podcast. Cinco de Mayo weekend is one of my favorite weekends of the year for boxing, and there were a lot of good things about this card. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. So head on over to Fightful.com for all the latest news regarding pro wrestling, MMA, and boxing. Fightful Boxing Newsletter. The new newsletter is going to come out this Thursday, recapping a very busy week with this fight, and we have a look forward into next week's fights. We got the Jared Hurd, Julian Williams fight, and the top-ranked ESPN card headline by Miguel Berchelt versus Francisco Vargas, and the rematch between Isaac Dagbe and Emmanuel Navarrete. So as I mentioned, leave us a thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to our new Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel, where we have plenty of content for you from the MMA side to the boxing side, and even on our Fightful Pro Wrestling YouTube channel, where we have tons of exclusive and podcasts recapping all things WWE, Ring of Honor, Impact, New Japan, you name it, NXT, NXT UK, 205 Live, again, you name it, plenty of stuff to go around on Fightful between pro wrestling, MMA, and boxing. I do want to thank everyone who tuned in at this point late at night. It's 2:11 here on the East Coast, or at least in Puerto Rico, which is the same as East Coast at this time of the year. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, for your comments. You've been a wonderful audience, and have a great night. Have a great Cinco de Mayo. Have a great rest of the weekend, everyone. Carlos Toro of FightfulBoxing.com signing out.